Cheering at pro wrestling shows in Japan is back, and 2023 is already shaping up to be a big year in the history of pro res. That's why you should listen to the Emerald Flow Show. From the Royal Road to the Green Mat, Paul and Gerard take you into the world of All Japan Pro Wrestling and Pro Wrestling Noah. Not only do we analyze events, but we examine business, who is getting over, what angles are working or not. Occasionally, we take a look at other Japanese promotions like DDT and Zero One. So if you're looking for more coverage of the world of Japanese wrestling, check out the Emerald Flow Show on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, available on all of your favorite podcast apps.
This podcast is a member of the Voices of Wrestling Podcasting Network. Visit voicesofwrestling.com to hear the rest of our great podcasts, as well as show reviews, columns, opinions, and updates across the world of wrestling.
Welcome back to Open the Voice Gate, Rewind and Rewatch, where we take a event in Dragon Gate history and we talk about it for Dragon Gate 25, the 25th anniversary of the Dragon System. We are members of the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network. You can find us on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network feed or on our own dedicated Open the Voice Gate feed on all podcast platforms and applications. You can follow us on Twitter at Open Voice Gate. If you'd like to donate to the show, click the link in the show notes. It'll take you to our redcircle.com landing site where you can set up a one-time or recurring donation. All you got to do is click the red box that says sponsor this podcast, and you're able to do that there. No obligation whatsoever, but I would like to thank all of our previous donors. I'm one of your hosts, your old pal, Mike Spears, joined alongside of our co-host, as always, Case Lowe. In Case, right now, I have what I believe right now that you sold me on, the best wrestling streaming service going on right now, CMLL on YouTube. How did they figure this out better than anyone else?
Oh, you want to dive into this already? Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have projected a lucha company to be the ones to have won the streaming wars in terms of usability, but I'll be damned, CMLL, I feel like I get my money's worth. I feel like the service is really easy to use. Outside of some CMLL-specific issues, some tech issues, as Shohei Ohtani begins the White Sox-Dodgers game with a leadoff home run here that he absolutely murdered.
Alex Castellanos here. I butchered that last name. I know it. Anyways, but yeah.
He missed first base. He went back to go get it. Anyways, the CMLL service is awesome. I'm glad. I had a lot of people reach out to me to say that they were getting hooked on CMLL through this podcast, which if you would have told me that even 4 years ago, I wouldn't have believed you. But I hope that everybody enjoyed the week that CMLL had this past week.
It's really having to reframe how we consume wrestling, and the idea that we've gone from peak wrestling where every service was a set price to now everything's kind of fluctuating, and it's how you derive the value out of the shows that I'm kind of adjusting my thought patterns about, because I used to be so vehemently against the Bushi Road, you subscribe then you pay for the pay-per-view. I still think that's an awful value, but I look at the value that, at least since we last talked, Case, I've basically been consuming CMLL at such an insane pace because the YouTube app is on every device I have. I just go click over to that. I'm like, okay, I'm going to get my fan leyendas worth out of this month. And I've already feel like I have just through 1 week of using it. And it's so easy to use.
Well, I hate the Bushi Road model because you're paying
twice.
Yeah, it's awful. And it feels cheap, and I don't know. I just don't like it. But the CMLL thing, like I told you last week, and I was telling everybody this, I'm normally a subscriber on the cheapest tier they have, which means I can watch the Tuesday Arena Mexico show live, and I can watch the Friday Arena Mexico show a week or two after the fact. I think it's a week and a half delay now because they normally go up Monday morning. And that works for me because I'm always a little bit behind on CMLL. If the Tuesday show looks good, I'll catch the end of the Tuesday show live. But I'm not in an immediate rush because I'm not covering it for any website to watch all of this stuff immediately. But when a big show rolls around, like the AEW 8-man show from earlier in the year, or this Fantastica Mania show, I'll do the same thing in September with the anniversary show. I'll bump up to that fan Leyenda tier, which again is $35 a month. It's not cheap by any means, but I'm now more invested in the Guadalajara show, which you get for free with, or you get with the lowest subscription, but it's like, well, now I'm paying for this. Let me watch Guadalajara. Oh, I'm going to get the Saturday Arena Coliseo show too. Oh, I'm also getting the Friday Arena Mexico show live now. It's a good service. I feel like I actually like the tiers they present because I can mold it month by month to work for what's best for me, because I'm not home a lot on Friday night, so I have no reason to have that Leyenda service if I'm, if the selling point is I can watch Arena Mexico live on Friday nights. Well, I can't do that. So again, that's why I watched on delay more often than not. But for a week like this, when you've got the Fantasticamania show, which was only on that tier anyways, and then the Saturday Arena Coliseo show, which was only on that tier, which had Zach versus Hechicero, and the Rocky Romero Angel Dioro match, which I thought was phenomenal as well. Like, all right, I'm locked in. Let me spend the money and let me get my money's worth.
Yeah, and at least for someone like me and like looking through my services, I'm at a point right now where, I'm going to get married soon. So a lot of like the services and stuff, like I'm going like, do I really need to keep these things
I
anymore?
just dropped New Japan World because I'm getting ready for a move, and I thought about it and I said, you know what? I haven't watched a New Japan show in a timely fashion since Wrestle Kingdom. And
sure.
I don't see myself going night by night to the G1 this year. If I need a New Japan show, I can find it, but I don't need New Japan World anymore. And I was a day one subscriber. It's the first time since 2014 that I've let that subscription lapse.
I had a under 100 user like membership ID before I gave up New Japan.
Yeah, it was December 1st, 2014 is when it launched. We're going to talk a lot about the history of Japanese streaming services today. This is actually a great opening segment, Mike.
Hey, it's just I'm watching Dr. Karante Jr. right now, and I just think about how, in contrast, and some of this is coming out of the frustration about how Dragon Gate's now choosing to present their content right now, that I look at CMLL and I'm going like, oh, I remember when everyone said, oh, Dragon Gate was one of the like toughest like value asks in all of streaming because it would be 1,500 yen and you only had 7 days to do so. And I'm going like, oh, but CMLL, all the major venues, you're getting everything for $35. And I'm just like, what would I at this point as a Dragon Gate fan be able to do? Or like if they had this as an opportunity case, like I feel like if there was like the standard Infinity tier and then like the pay-per-view tier and house show tier on YouTube, I probably would cancel nearly everything except for Wrestle Universe, I feel like.
And to be clear, because I know some people have asked us about it, I don't know if you have an update. I know nothing about this Dragon Gate logo appearing on Wrestle Universe. I'm in the dark on that as much as anybody else. Yeah,
I am of the belief there that this is maybe related to meta tags and how, Noah bought Dragon Gate shows. They did the Global Dream show, and that was a Noah/Dragon Gate show. That's what I figured. That's what it was. I think for Dragon Gate, there's not really any news about their streaming service, and there's not really any news about the YouTube unless you heard anything new this week.
No, every possible contact I have at Dragon Gate, I have let them know my feelings on the YouTube change, and I don't think it's going to go anywhere, but they are at least very aware of how I feel, and I'm very frustrated by it, especially as we, move past a show like the Rhea Fuda Homecoming show, which had Fuda and Mochi versus Ben and Minorita, and as we come up on the Coach Minoura Homecoming show, which has the return of Konami Ichikawa, and, we talked last year at Kingdom Gate how that was, maybe the most fun we had watching a Dragon Gate show last year, and so now not only are we not getting YouTube uploads, we're not getting director's cuts on the network. We're not getting anything supplemental. And it's driving me absolutely insane. I really do not like it.
And like, we are fortunate right now that the dollar is so much stronger than the yen. So the network is under, I think right now for the rate, it comes in under $10 a month right now. How things have gone, it's very hard in June. And we could, as we get into talking about 2014 and how their schedule did, it's not dissimilar to what happened this month, but we're in essentially because nothing goes up everything is dead until the end of the month. And then we're looking until the first week of July for any Dragon Gate stuff on the network. And that's a bad value, I would say, at that point.
Yeah, because it's like I see that they're maybe starting to upload some next shows, and that is super cool. I would love a next library on Dragon Gate because a lot of that stuff hasn't been seen. I mean, I think back to
true sicko hour stuff.
Oh my god. I mean, absolutely, because there was the next anniversary show in 2009, but I think that was at Shinkiba because that wasn't at the Sanctuary. But that's like an awesome show that people should track down if they can find it. The Dragon Gate next anniversary Infinity episode, and then like if you remember for a while. There were I don't remember who it was that was like the primary uploader of these, but there were all those Gaiora bumpers.
Right. Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. Like that was the number one way, unless was a special Infinity, how one consumed Dragon Gate Next, which was now Prime Zone. But it was through these bumpers that were essentially like if there was a show or something on Gaiora that went up early, they would have like these like interstitials that they would play until the next bout of programming, and it would be like 9-minute digest.
Yeah, and it would, either be like a recap of a Korkin, or you would get just a random, hey, look at this, here's some next footage. I'm trying to find the exact match that I made sure I saved, because I had one of these matches sitting on a hard drive for the longest time. It was July 22nd, 2016. So this would have been the week of Kobe World that year. And it was Big R Shimizu and at the time Futa Nakamura, which is now Ben K, against El Lindemann and Kaito Ishida. And that for the longest time was like one of the earliest Ben matches that we had. It wasn't until the network uploaded his literal debut, which was him against T-Hawk from the Sanctuary on one of those next shows. So like there's a ton of stuff like that I would love to be able to see. But let's be honest, if you're trying to grow the audience of the network, it's first run original content, and it's not Ben K and Flamita playing soccer as entertaining as that was, and it's obviously not the next archives. We need a little something current there, because I think if the viewing patterns hadn't been disrupted, just looking at the cards we're getting now with, again, Mochizuki Jr. and Flamita and Minorita back in the fold, and then Z-Brat's doing all the interesting things we're doing, there's a real possibility that, again, had they still been uploading on YouTube, we'd be doing 2 episodes this week. We'd be doing one talking about the old and one raving about the new. And now we're a month out from Kobe World, and we have nothing new to talk about.
Oh, easily. And it is when the company goes on about expansion and about trying to regain Dragon Gate's like foothold in at least America and Canada, the consumption patterns have changed so much that not having those YouTube, I know that there might be geolocation issues or there could be. It's not that I know, but I could foresee that being a bad justification for not doing the YouTube uploads. But like, there's reasoning that they will try that people might come up with. But with the way that it works in North America, at the very least case, what's the easiest way to get wrestling to people? It's on YouTube. And especially for promotions that you have an ask of, all right, Dragon Gate Network being 1,500 yen, and how it's not always like a show a week, but sometimes it comes out to essentially over 50 shows a year with that. You're not able to just get people by just the opening match each time that they are airing on the network. You need to have more, and being able to show aspects of the company, and especially for like guys going on excursion.
Yes.
It was such a thing in the past when we've been asked to be able to say like, oh, here's this YouTube upload. Here is this YouTube playlist that we added some stuff to, but a lot of it is first run stuff from Dragon Gate. And if you don't have those sorts of things, it just shows how entrenched you are in a mindset that does not pay off for what you're claiming to do.
Let me hop back to CMLL here, because I think we've made our thoughts pretty clear on that. The Zack Sabre Jr. Hechicero match, Arena Coliseo last Saturday, it is a match that is going to finish in a lot of people's top 10s. It's my number 3 CMLL match of the year so far. Not something that'll finish my overall top 10. I liked the AEW match a little bit more, and I liked the Mystico and Brillante Jr. versus Mascara Dorada and Neon tag from February a little bit more. But Hechicero versus Zach is absolutely worth going out of your way to see. And it made me really start to think about, Dragon Gate in the West, and how I was talking to somebody today about how, for as long as I've been in this bubble, this is the most interest that Mexican wrestling has ever had. And it's funny because it's not two great companies propping each other up. It's CMLL being really good and making headlines that way, and AAA being really bad at making headlines that way. And when you look at that in comparison, this is going to be a long-winded point I'm going to get to, but I'm going to get to it, so hang with me. Yesterday on that WWE Vault YouTube channel, they uploaded the clipped 6-man tag from WrestleMania weekend in Phoenix. Did you see that?
Oh yeah. I had a bunch of people ask me what the hell was up with that.
Yeah, and the answer is we don't have any idea.
I feel like we could do a proclamation for everyone involved. It seems like whenever they put that YouTube channel, someone was like, "Hey, let's slide this in there," and they got it past their boss.
Yeah, I feel like it was uploaded by accident, quite honestly.
And for it being like a 9-minute clip, I think maybe they got access to the old DGUSA YouTube channel and maybe just dragged and dropped.
Maybe, yeah. So, but there was a comment that I saw getting thrown around our Voices of Wrestling Slack yesterday, where one of the comments left on that video was, it's so interesting to see how Dragon Gate has influenced the wrestling world, nowadays, or something like that. And I saw some pushback on that, and I found that to be odd, because I think by and large, especially in American wrestling, people are just doing a lesser version of the Dragon Gate style. They have watered down something that was really unique and really interesting. And watching Zach versus Hechicero, and knowing the training that a lot of these Dragon Gate wrestlers go through and the backgrounds that they have, it made me really wish that they would dig their heels in and try not to be, fucking peak Evolve, not to be this grappling mat-based company, but to really embrace grappling and mat-based wrestling a little bit more than they do. Because I think if you took the Yave approach, but then mixed it with the speed that these Dragon Gate guys have, I think that would be so interesting to watch. And I think that would help them carve out a niche that they've admittedly lost, not because of the talent currently on the roster, but because of the aping that has gone on around the world with these guys. And Zach versus Hechicero just made me think, like, man, it'd be really nice to see something like that in Dragon Gate.
Yeah, that comment, I think that very much it is the fact that now we are 18 years past the point of inflection for Dragon Gate in the West. And I would say, by and large, 18 years can do a lot to a style. And especially as a belief that, like, wrestling is constantly changing in a way that the remark that, WWE and US wrestling writ large are influenced by it, I think you just have to look at how much the reliance on 6 and 8-man tags are worked in a certain manner. That's just not how 6 and 8-man tags are worked elsewhere in the world. It comes from one point, and there you go with that. Your greater point about Zach and Hechicero and that style and being able to put it on display and how Dragon Gate could do so. The thing I would really like to see, and this is going to be off the beaten path a little bit, guys. Well, what is the one thing that you always hear about someone's background in Dragon Gate?
That they have some sort of fighting background.
Exactly. You hear that Ryoya Tanaka won like a prefecture karate championship at a certain age. The fact that Benkei went on to college to wrestle collegiately. The high-level grappling of La Estrella, the many different schools of martial arts that Minorita trained in, and all of that. It's less that I want them to see like a grappling based effect. I think we have seen more than enough over the last week proof that going for a pure grappling as it pertains to Japanese wrestling, it's just as dead of a style at the box office as it is in the United States. I think
that's been established. I could have told you that before Bloodsport ran in Japan, but I'm glad that they doubled down on it.
But we got to see what happens when you have to tarp off Sumo Hall.
I did not get to see what happened. I would have watched that if I had a gun pointed at my head. Thank you.
I watched Arena Coliseo and I watched Bloodsport.
I watched Arena Coliseo. That was plenty for me. I'm good on that.
I think that you have something with these guys and their backgrounds that, at the very least, I don't know what the future of Buyuden is, but the idea at a certain point that Buyuden harkens back to a 90s kind of sensibility where there was more play about martial arts and about combat skills there. I would still be intrigued in seeing what if they go more towards that and that route. I think that you could, especially if like the Buyuden shows, like whatever they end up being, like I personally think they're done. But if somehow they decide, hey, we still have so many shows booked at Shinjuku Face for the remainder of 2024, we're going to run this out. I would be interested in like the idea of, all right, UT versus Minorita. Like, let's have them do a no strikes, no dives match. Like that kind of stuff, I feel like would be incredibly fascinating.
Yeah, no, it's something I want to see them embrace. I mean, that was part of what really woke us up out of the coma that 2017 and 2018 put us in, was when they did the rookie ranking tournament. And part of this was editorializing by an English-speaking fan base, but when you looked at the way Shun was wrestling at the time, and you looked at Ishida, and you looked at what UT was starting to really embrace with the Yave background there, and all the guys that were pitted against each other, it was notable that it was a different wrestling style than what Yamato and Tozawa and all of the other guys had been doing in the generation prior, and it was a really refreshing change. And I think now we're sort of in limbo where you happen to have a lot of undersized guys on this roster, even for Dragon Gate standards. Those are the guys that are the most over. And I don't know if they've carved out a unique enough style to where it's beneficial for everybody involved. And that would be my challenge going forward is, again, I think you have guys that, can they do hold for hold what Zach and Hechicero did? No. But I actually think they can mirror it quite nicely. And I would really like to see them dive into that just a little bit more, because I think it's a really interesting style of wrestling. And, you know, outside of Zach and Hechicero and Kyle O'Reilly and, you know, UT once a year, I don't think we get a lot of guys that can do that at a high level and aren't 70 years old. You know, I know people are really into the Hechicero versus Blue Panther match. I wasn't, because Blue Panther is ancient, you know, and I don't say that as a dig at him on a personal level, but I don't want to watch him wrestle. I thought what Danielson did with him was a miracle. I can't get into him versus Hechicero. I can't take it seriously, but I do like the spirit of what they're doing. I just want to see guys that are 25 and not 75 doing that.
And as you're saying, seeing what like the Dragon Gate tilt about it would be. Would it be something where UT and his maestros, he would have a different style that has been developed that's, of course, would be different for Hechicero just from like size and training background, but I want to see like the derivatives that can come out of it. Like what happens when MMA Minorita goes up against Yaveo UT.
I think it would be like, because we're so obsessed with MMA Minorita, where, you know, that Kurt Angle Roderick Strong match on like where Kurt Angle beats the shit out of him. I think that's like, if you gave me the pencil, I'm doing Perk Angle with Minorita. I'm doing 2006. He's wearing a mouthpiece. He's on ECW. It's the best year of Kurt Angle's career. It's just a shame he almost died doing it. I want that, but from Minorita.
Can we make sure that Minorita always has a pension, like telling people backstage saying, like, don't try me?
That'd be so fun. Let me ask you a wrestling question before we get into Rewind and Rewatch. How much wrestling does your fiance watch with you?
Very little.
Okay.
You know, she, Kingsley came with me, or we made like a vacation out of All Out last Labor Day. And that was her first wrestling show. And then I took her to her sister and her brother-in-law to a Dallas-Fort Worth shindy. And that has been, other than her like coming in to like coming over and I have something on in the background or I'm covering something, like that's outside of this. However, interestingly enough, she knows and loves the Bella twins.
Oh, well, of course. I mean, they're international powerhouses.
I mean, hosting a new podcast about the greatest episodic entertainment going today, Love Island USA.
Of course, naturally. I think they're one of the 1.5 million people that have a Sirius XM podcasting deal, I'm sure. They're just handing those things out left and right. Yeah, good for the Bellas.
Yeah, they just go to Podcast One down and was it downtown Hollywood? Is that where their
why not?
Yeah.
No, the industry's in good shape. I'm glad that everybody gets a voice. It's really good for advertising, and it's very easy to promote yourself now. It's awesome. Anyways, I asked this because my girlfriend does not like wrestling, doesn't like when I have it on, doesn't get it by any means. But we were hanging out on Saturday, and she fell asleep on the couch as we were watching TV, and she was out for a while. So I was like, well, I'm a little behind on Fantastica Mania right now. Let me throw on this Arena Mexico show real quick. And when she woke up, it was the Rocky Romero, Taiji Ishimori, Mascara Dorada Templario match with Kanimoto at ringside. And she immediately had a million questions about Kanimoto. Who is this guy? What's his deal? Why does he look like that? What's going on? And so I showed her, because Rob Viper had just tweeted it out, because I didn't realize until he got announced for Collision that the infamous apron drop kick where Kanimoto goes flying off the apron, that Ultimo Guerrero was the one that hit him. I had never realized that before. So it was fresh in my mind because I just saw Rob Viper tweet that out. So I showed her the Kanimoto drop kick, where I'm sure everybody listening has seen it, but it's a little person who gets
Kamonito, not Koji Kanemoto. It took me a second because I thought you were talking about Koji Kanemoto. I was like, I have not seen Koji Kanemoto down in Mexico in a long time.
Good. Look, I know he's hashtag canceled, but I would love it if he would show up on those canceled like IWRG shows.
Oh yeah,
like morally, I don't want to watch Travis Banks. Morally, I will watch Koji Kanemoto. I wish he would show up in Mexico.
but yeah, no, the most infamous Lucha Libre gif of all time.
Yes. So I showed her that. I've never told a joke that she thought was as funny. I've never said something that she thought was as interesting. She downloaded the gif and sent it to her mom because her mom needed to see it. That to her was the funniest thing she had ever seen. And it's the one wrestling thing that she was like, I finally understand it. I get why you like this. And it's that gif of Ultimo Guerrero cleaning that man's clock.
So I'm going to extrapolate this, if you allow me, Kay.
Please.
Like, come play in our playhouse here for a second. There is a way that we can get her deeper into this. And I hate to say this, Case, you're going to step into the court verse more often and take her with you, because I think Microman is going to be like the thing,
Oh, that's a good poll. I kind of wish, I know he's a AAA affiliated guy now, but next time MLW's in Cicero, Illinois, Court should do me a favor, do me a solid, and get him on that show.
I thought he still does MLW.
He does, but he can't do the CMLL shows.
That's a bummer. Yeah,
no. He's trust me. Well, actually, he might actually be out of MLW now. I think I just read that he was gone.
I mean, what has this world come to at this point?
He has not worked MLW since last year. He's done.
I thought Microman was like seriously like on a tear in MLW.
Look, there was a while there where he was basically their 2004 Kenta Kobashi. He was their most highlighted guy on every show.
Yeah, and at that point I was like, okay, like this makes sense. Like that this is going to work out for the long term for him. But it made, I mean, the 2017 runner-up for Rookie of the Year, Microman.
He's working Game Changer a lot, and
oh, you can't do that. You can't bring your girlfriend to Game Changer, man.
I wouldn't bring myself to Game Changer.
That's what I'm saying. Like, you can't...
No, I'm not doing that. May 26th, Microman defeats Kevin Blackwood and 710. I tell ya, I just hate this promotion with a passion. Why is Kevin Blackwood losing to Microman?
Buddy, if we could solve that question, I feel like we could solve almost every question that GCW has.
Semi-main event. Effie defeats Broski Jimmy, who I'm now learning is the alter ego of Jimmy Lloyd.
Jimmy Lloyd, yes. Yeah, now he is the injured Cardona flunky.
I can't imagine anything worse. I mean, that promotion is actually worse than I would have ever thought. Okay, so the night before in Thalia Hall, which is a Chicago venue, that is I can't believe they allow Game Changer to run there because that is such a beautiful concert venue. But they did Microman versus Broski Jimmy, where once again Microman went up. I can't fathom anything worse. I gotta be honest. It sounds horrible. Kylie Ray versus Dark Sheik, 14 minutes on that Chicago show. Again, I wouldn't watch it if it was in front of me in my living room. I just can't imagine anything worse.
Trailer Plus, one of the things I realized I was still paying for. That
yeah, you probably don't need that. Probably can let the Trailer Plus go.
Hey, there was a time that SWE Fury existed, and if SWE Fury still existed, I would be going to DFW Indies more often.
Pour one out.
Yeah, I mean, instead, I told you how I can't go back to that one because Dante Leon's champion, right?
What happened to him? He's not working Noah anymore.
No, he's he's moved back to the Metroplex. Like he's been because Athena's husband runs another promotion in Bedford, I think, and he does that one too. So
gotcha. Yeah, no, he hasn't been in Noah for almost a year now. I didn't realize that since last July.
And nothing of value is lost.
That's one of those things that just gets under your gears. I love it. Can we talk, Mike? Can we talk about 2014 Dragon Gate, the reason we're here today?
I would love to. So this time on Rewind and Rewatch, we are talking about the doubleheader that they had in Sapporo Tyson Hall in June of 2014. This doubleheader consists of 2 episodes of Dragon Gate Infinity at the time. We will have these uploaded for you all. It is Infinity 340 and 341 for those who want to keep on following along at home. And we aren't going too far ahead from the last time we talked about Dragon Gate and Rewind and Rewatch. This is going to be like our shortest ever timeline portion, as we just kind of need to fast forward 4 weeks.
Yeah, no, this is great. We really don't have to do a timeline. The reason we're doing this, we obviously did Dead or Alive 2014 last month. We're doing these shows in June of 2014. For those that maybe haven't heard the story, these shows have never been posted online as far as I'm aware of. They aired on Gaora. I think some of your deepest, seediest, and I say this with love and respect, I think some of your deepest and seediest Puro DVD distributors, they had access to this show. But as far as I'm concerned, the YouTube links that are going to be in the description of this episode are going to be the first time that these shows have ever been made available online. Because what happened is, and I kind of want to get into, instead of doing storyline, timeline stuff this week, because we just did that to get to Dead or Alive. And look, the only thing you really need to know that has changed since the last time we talked is that King of Gate happened and Jimmy Susumu beat T-Hawk in King of Gate in the King of Gate finals. And so he's going to get a Dream Gate match. It would be the week after these shows happen. But at this point in time, we're talking mid-2014. Dragon Gate is airing their Big 5, Dead or Alive, Dangerous Gate, Kobe World, Gate of Destiny, Final Gate. Those shows are on Ustream, which, rest in peace, that was perhaps the greatest pay service that we ever had. But you were paying, $12.99 per event, essentially. And then you had all of your monthly Cork and Hall shows. Those had also been added to the Ustream lineup. But your Kobe Sambo Hall shows and your Osaka number 2 shows and shows like this that were taking place in Hokkaido, or your shows at the time in Hakata Star Lanes in Fukuoka, these were getting uploaded primarily on Daily Motion. By the time that I started following along, and this is where I'm curious to know your timeline, Mike, but I never used like a WrestleBay. I never had to download torrents. My viewing was always Daily Motion which then transferred into a few different things, but Daily Motion was the starting point for me.
So this is the generation difference right here. I traded at that point because I was out of college. I was a young man in my prime in Miami, Florida in 2014. And that was a way to get these reliably. That there were about like 3 or 4 traders that were getting Gaora stuff on the regular. As well, Daily Motion was a big time. I was always, because of when I went to undergrad and grad school initially, case it was the last days of file share. So talking about Kazaa, BearShare, LimeWire, programs like that. This was the time before college ITs kind of cut down and broke those down, and you were unable to. They were doing port blocking and all of that. So for a while, I was doing file sharing to get Dragon Gate shows, whichever ones I was not able to. I was a Russell Bay, Rudos kind of person. I would then look for a file share. And then after that, and as I got older, then I would be doing trading. And there were people that would also, at a time, I would love to talk to the people that were kind of around at this time. There was one person who would do like remote connection and like would drag and drop through like remote connection MP4s onto your desktop.
Really? See, I don't even know about that.
That was a 2012, 2013 Russell Bay thing. That was like during the whole internet wrestling drought in 2012, 2013. That was one of the ways that I saw Best of the Super Junior 2012.
Okay, and I'm glad you said that, because that should probably be explained, because sometimes you and I will come on here and we'll talk about how 2012 and 2013 footage is really hard to find, especially with Dragon Gate. But I guess, I don't know, it might even be worse for other promotions. Like, look, I'm not looking for like 2012 All Japan ever.
Or like DDT at that time or stuff like that.
Unless it's a specific Omega or Ibushi thing that I know has been saved. But yeah, right. if I wanted to find, Noah's different because King's Arc has been around, and that guy just has, Noah I know I can find. Just enough people have always tracked Noah that I can, outside of 2014 Global League, which I only referenced because it's one of the best things Noah's ever done, and that stuff is very hard to track down. Like, I can find Noah stuff if I'm looking for it, but there's a time, and this is as New Japan is gaining prominence in the West, where...
Yeah, this is post-Bullet Club formation.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there were shows that you wouldn't get, that people would have to track down, and sometimes it would be a month later.
Oh, there were times, there were tournaments and there were Dragon Gate shows that, over the years, and this is part of like my past profession as a media preservationist, case, I would always try to be someone that I would keep like a hard drive backup and then a thumb drive backup and all of that, but it would take months or maybe even like years for some of these things during this 15-month period really to reappear, at least internationally, the way that it kind of did. There was like a time also that I believe that over this time that there were people that would go get the commercial DVDs and make DVD traders, individual discs of shows that way. And that kind of became a way to fill in the blanks. But case that was something that you would do years after the time, because Dragon Gate would release like their season DVDs 2 or 3 years after the fact.
Yeah, no, it was intentionally done, but it was like the Dragon Gate USA DVD release schedule, where they'd be promoting, hey, this is the summer of 2012 and the summer of 2014. It was that level of a delay.
But that was related to network and actually Gaora.
Yes. Yeah, no, this wasn't laziness like Gabe. There was a reason they were doing it. But this is why I will never not take for granted the fact that there are times where you can watch multiple Japanese wrestling shows live at the same time. That DDT and New Japan and Dragon Gate can all be running shows, and you can all watch them live. Because in 2014, when I was really getting into it, you would have New Japan on Ustream. You would have certain Dragon Gate shows on Ustream. There was no live All Japan. There was no live Noah. There was no live DDT. There was no live Big Japan at the time where people really cared about Big Japan. And so, God bless and God rest his soul, Real Hero. He was the guy that a lot of us were getting this from. And I miss Real Hero a lot. I thought he was such a great guy. And so, you would check at the start of the month, you would check the Gaora TV listing, and you would go, okay, all right, so the Kobe Sambo Hall show is going to happen on the 11th, but it's going to air on the 27th. So you're going to read the live report that day, but then you're going to have to wait 2 weeks to get for it. And it was, an exciting feeling at the time. Now it obviously feels so archaic, and I don't need to explain how media has changed for the last decade to everybody listening, but it was just the kind of thing we went through. And then this goes beyond the shows that we're talking about, but Ustream goes away basically after the G1 in the summer of 2014. Like the Dragon Gate Kobe show, Kobe World that year was on Ustream. I don't think Dangerous Gate was, and if Dangerous Gate was, then Gate of Destiny definitely wasn't. And that's when we all very briefly had to pivot to Nico Nico, which is a Japanese, pay-per-view streaming type service that was overly complicated, wasn't built to translate into English by any means, wasn't built to take, your bank card if you had an American bank. It was very, very hard to use. And I remember, like, King of Pro Wrestling 2014, which is, obviously a New Japan show. This is now, people are invested in New Japan. Nakamura is a guy, and Okada's a guy, and AJ Styles is there. And there was an IWGP heavyweight title change on that show, and this was pre-New Japan World, but post-Ustream. And so, people are, they're loading up they were called smiling points. They were loading up their smiling points so they could see AJ Styles lose to Hiroshi Tanahashi. And so that became the norm for Dragon Gate for quite a while, because New Japan World launches in December of 2014, but the network doesn't come along until, the end of 27, the beginning of 2017, I think.
Yeah, so Nico, funny enough that it's come up, Nico is going through major issues right now. Funny. Interesting enough, like, the only people who still use Nico, I think, are Big Japan at this point.
That sounds right. And I think, if I'm correct, they might even be weaning themselves off of it.
Right, like, they had, like, a massive, like, server breakdown that they were, like, the pay-per-view feature is completely gone. It was such a difference because how everything then became so reliant on if you weren't someone who was getting stuff off of Nico and watching it live. And the reason why certain things stayed on Nico and certain things didn't was because natively there was already a streaming option through Gaora. So it was just the reason why Dragon Gate was able to do this, to my knowledge, was essentially, it was just like, oh, hey, we send this there too? Okay. Sure, why not? But it was never intended to work out that way. So the reason why those shows would pop up and they would be in the format that they were in, and the fact that they even made air, was the fact that Gaora was already there doing live streams for native Japanese audiences.
Yeah, so the website was hard to use. People didn't like using it. I started thinking today as I was preparing for this, like, there would be times that I wouldn't buy a Korakuen show. And this happened a little bit more towards the middle of 2015, and then again at the end of 2016, when you would have Western interest dip. If they didn't buy the show live, I forget what exactly it was, but there was a weird replay window there. And so sometimes there would be a Dragon Gate Korakuen show, and if nobody grabbed it to upload it, you would then have to wait for the Gaora airing, and that might be not for another 2 or 3 weeks, so you'd be super delayed on seeing the Korakuen, let alone, you're still at that point dealing with, okay, when is Sambo Hall going to air? When is Hakata Star Lanes going to air? Am I going to avoid spoilers? Am I going to read the iHeart DG recap? It's just this whole thing. And so the reason we're talking about these shows is that Real Hero at the time was uploading everything on Daily Motion. He is uploading New Japan, he is uploading All Japan, he is uploading Noah, he is uploading Hard Hit, he's uploading Dragon Gate. There wasn't a promotion in Japan that made tape that he wasn't uploading, and he was getting everything. I mean, I wish people now could go back and look at, his Daily Motion channel in 2014 before all that stuff got wiped away, because it's just an incredible archive. Unfortunately, a lot of it got lost. But these shows never popped up there. And at this point, I'm in on Dragon Gate. I want to watch everything. And I knew that these shows were taped, and then they just never popped up anywhere. And we are lucky enough to where we have a lot of people that listen to this show that when we say something offhanded, we're going through Cage Match at the end of the show, and it's like, oh man, I'd love to see that Infinity from 2009. We have listeners that are nice enough to, send us DMs and be like, hey man, I actually have this. Let me send it to you. And it's always greatly appreciated. It's not lost on me that people want to share their footage with us that we don't have, because it's really nice. I've been asking about these two shows for a literal decade now. For 10 years, I have been waiting for somebody to come through and have these shows. And Mike, earlier this year, you stumbled across some 2014 Dragon Gate, and these shows were listed. I've held off. I think it's about 5 months ago you found all this footage. I've held off for 5 months now because I want to do this in June. I want to do this 10 years later. And I was so excited to watch these shows for the first time. It was like an old guy opening a pack of baseball cards from when he was a kid. Just every little thing was new and exciting, but also familiar and comforting. And I had so much fun watching these shows. So again, if you no one's seen them, at least as far as I'm concerned, so the links are going to be in the description of this episode. Watch along and then come listen to us, because we're going to talk a lot of 2014 Dragon Gate now.
Absolutely. And should we kind of get into our big takeaways at this point? My first one is just like talking about like the baseball card pack, forgetting how much I loved the, at least at that era, style of Infinity Opens with the Neo Atomic Motor song. Like it's now the same song they use for coming back for intermission with it, which I feel like completely loses it. But I miss the old Infinity Opens where you get the champions, you go through all the units, and it just felt right.
Well, that's one of the weird things about watching all this stuff live on the network now, is that we don't get the Gaiora production. And I like the intro to these episodes for a different reason, because I kind of forgot that, they'll do like an opening shot of a wrestler in the empty arena, and they'll set the tone, whether it's going to be an episode that's focused on Yamato or BxB Hulk or Akira Tozawa or whoever. They set the stage in a really dramatic way that, because of, unfortunately, their production limitations now when they air it live on the network, that we just don't get. And I kind of forgot what a production every episode of Infinity used to be.
Right. The closest we come to this actually is around the Big Five nowadays.
Yes.
And even at that aspect, you're not getting the full intro, or it is with that. But it really, I'm trying to think what year it completely dropped case, but I constantly go back to how I would say maybe it was like up until the foundation of the network, the amount of extra content that Dragon Gate shows would have, going from the intros to like the fact that it's always like Katsuya Ishikawa to going like, we're here for Dragon Gate Infinity, and it's like KZ, and you see KZ pondering at Sapporo Tyson Hall, and you're like, oh, all right, I know this episode is going to be about KZ and BxB Hulk because we're in Hokkaido, and we would get that, or we would get the fantastic pre or backstage interviews that we'd have before the shows. And it was just, those were a big takeaway for me. It's like getting those back in the fashion, because this was a format of Infinity that I feel like was one of the best times, but it also was a time that you could tell Gaiora was much more about, I mean, they sent Ishikawa to the shows live at that time. And that just doesn't happen anymore.
No, I mean, the way Infinity has aired in different formats over the years has been so interesting to watch, because when you go back to the late 2000s and you're talking really, I think 2008 was probably the peak of this format, where it was an hour long, and they'd cut it up and they'd bounce around to all these different things in all of these different towns. And that was a really engaging way of watching TV. Now, there was a frustrating aspect to it of, hey, there's this 20-minute Speed Muscle versus Saito and Horiguchi match. you're going to see 6 minutes of it. That really sucked. But the way they put that TV together in that era was an art form. And by this point, I remember this being a conversation of the Observer Awards, where people who had previously voted for Dragon Gate Infinity as best TV, again, 2008, 2009, 2010, by this era when you were getting full shows, nothing clipped, you were getting the full block, people had stopped voting for best TV show because it didn't feel like a TV show, but it felt awesome. It felt big. I go back to what we said last month when we reviewed Dead or Alive 2014. I read the note in the Observer from Dave where he was comparing Dragon Gate at this era to UFC in Brazil, where it felt like the biggest thing on earth. It felt like the crowds were more than a pro wrestling crowd. It felt like this very spiritual type of gathering. And it's funny he said that about Dead or Alive, because I did not get the vibe. I mean, that Dead or Alive crowd was great, but in Sapporo for these two shows in this small building, oh my God. I mean, these fans are so into it, and it felt bigger than just your average wrestling crowd. It was really, really exciting to go back and watch that.
Yeah, so let's talk about this building for a second, because this was one of my takeaways. Sapporo Tyson Hall went away, I think, 2017 or thereabouts. Then promotions moved to Susukino Mars, of which I'd never really heard anything nice said about Susukino Mars. And it was at this point, this was a big time for Dragon Gate making those tours. You were able to get 1,000 people into Tyson Hall. And when you had a promotion at that point where it was not just BxB Hulk and KZ, you also had T-Hawk and others from the Sapporo area more and more, and especially in 2014, it felt very much like this is a show for the Hokkaido natives seeing their hometown guys. And it felt like that much more so throughout the show. And I feel like a lot of that is because Tyson Hall felt like that sort of venue where I knew we were going to do a show that was based around this venue, but there was little moments when I'm like, am I certain this is not Hakata Star Lanes? Just looking at the wall and all of that. And that there's a little romance to the old Dragon System venues that we don't have anymore. And I got a little bit of that for Sapporo Tyson.
Well, I mean, look, this goes back to everything we talked with Jay about a few months ago, where the venue situation in Japan is dire right now, when it's only going to get worse, because this was a great venue. And it wasn't until you reminded me that it went away when it did that I forgot, this is a place where All Japan, and granted, we're not talking peak All Japan here, we're talking 2010 All Japan, but they would run Triple Crown matches here. In 2015, Dragon Gate ran their King of Gate finals here. Big Japan had the last show in this building. Big Japan made such a big deal out of it being the last show in this building. I remember this now. The main event was Daisuke Sekimoto, Masato Tanaka, and Takashi Sugiura versus Harashima, Yuji Hino, and Yuji Okabayashi. And that match is awesome. And so in this part of the country, this was where everybody ran. And then that went away, and they moved to the gymnasium that you were just talking about. And then that went away. And it's why now most promotions simply ignore this part of the country, but then you have promotions like Dragon Gate who run where they run now on the artificial soccer field inside that looks terrible. But you know what? As far as I'm concerned, with the knowledge I have, that is the building to run wrestling in, and nobody has been able to come up with a viable substitute. And we see this in Hakata now too, or I'm sorry, in Fukuoka now too, where Hakata Star Lanes goes away, and you have to move in to the smaller venue across Fukuoka that they run now, but it's killed that whole town. Final Gate gets harder and harder to draw every year because Hakata Star Lanes doesn't exist, and the venue that replaced it isn't as good. And I don't know if any market suffered more than this market and this venue going away in particular.
Yeah, and throughout this, I mean, Don Fuji getting to explore the space, big highlight of the shows. Nothing consequential with Don Fuji on these, on this double shot, but he did discover one thing about Sapporo Tyson Hall case, and you know what that was?
What was that?
That they have a large garage door that he could use in his matches.
Yes, they do. So, in terms of things that have aged the best, and I've got a whole list here of big picture thoughts I want to go through, but I would say the intro to the Infinities, I'm with you there, absolutely. Just the whole production of what Infinity used to be was very, very nice. Now, look, the trade-off is we could have that back, but then nothing would air live on the network, and I'd rather things air live on the network. So even if the single cam shows aren't as engaging, and I wish there's a little more spice to them here and there, I'm going to take the fact that we get live shows from Kobe, Kyoto, and Osaka now as a trade-off. Something that really caught me by surprise, again, watching Infinities in full from 10 years ago, is everything on these shows got much more time than I think they would have in 2024. Kotoko works the opening matches on both shows. Mike, Kotoko spends a combined 27 minutes in the ring across both of those opening matches. That feels insane to look at with 2024 eyes.
Yeah, that just doesn't happen.
Yeah, I mean, that was my note for both of the openers was, man, this feels like it's going a long time. And then sure enough, it went a long time.
And I think we direct that to COVID case.
Yes, 100%.
Because we saw in COVID when they moved the match times down to 15 minutes for the undercard, that drastically changed how people get ring time. I mean, the shortest match on night 2 was 8 minutes and 39 seconds. You go and look at just look at the Hokkaido triple shot. You're not going to find very many undercard matches longer than that on a 2024 Dragon Gate show. And I think that there are positives and negatives to that, but it was the one thing that I think maybe in a way has aged the worst, and it might just be because I'm now so expectant of the shorter matches, was there were times on these shows where I just was like, all right, I've seen way too much of Gamma for this show. I need him to get out the ring.
It's a tough Gamma weekend. When you got him and Maria on both nights, that is a tough draw.
At peak Gamma and Maria.
Yes. No, that's we'd file that under what's aged the worst.
Easily. But I think that the show lanes, I mean, if you look now on the network and on the non-Korakuen or big shows, most of them are about 2 hours to 2 hours and 10 minutes of ring time. Both of these shows, including intermission, which was about 5 minutes, were 2 hours and 30 each. So that's a huge change, I would say, in Dragon Gate over the past decade.
And you can feel it, on the back half of these shows. It's good because the last 3 matches on the second show, 18 minutes, 18 minutes, 18 minutes, they're all roughly in that range. The last 3 matches on the first show, 15 minutes, 11 minutes, and 20 minutes. And, sure as shit, especially on the second show, you gave those matches time to breathe and things worked out better. And I fully believe, even with the generational shift that's happened, that Kakuta and Yoshioka and Skywalker, I'm not worried about guys working 20-minute matches in Dragon Gate, but you're seeing, especially outside of Korakuen, a lot of main events that are 13 or 14 minutes. And I feel like the continued critique that a lot of us have had, especially a lot of longtime Dragon Gate fans have had in this new era of the promotion, which is, again, heavily slanted by the changes they had to institute during COVID, is on these big shows, the Brave Gate match or the Triangle Gate match or some Twin Gate matches. How many times have we said, oh man, that was just getting going when it ended? And this era of this promotion, I will say, did not have that issue.
And I wonder if it was all of the years of training us to expect the match times that there were that causes so much of a system shock when people see the sub 10 minute Brave Gate matches or the Twin Gate matches that have 3 teams and they do eliminations and they're down to a final 2 after 7 minutes.
Yes. So yes, that is what I've got on my my age the worst. Mike, what do you have next on your list of things that we take away from a decade old of TV?
I think it's worth noting at this point just the construction of Mad Blanky.
This is what I have next on my list as well.
So the big storyline that has happened in the month from Dead or Alive to this doubleheader in Sapporo was the fallout of BxB Hulk leaving Mad Blanky. He is unaffiliated and the June Corkin was based around and this becomes a storyline around Hulk and Mad Blanky going forward, a handicap match for the name, image, and likeness of Mad Blanky, essentially, that BxB Hulk goes up against 4 members of Mad Blanky. He gets put down pretty quickly. It turns into a larger match after this, and it turns into a 5-on-5 like superstars match where Shima, T-Hawk, Jimmy Susumu, Akira Tozawa, the nominal leaders of Team Veteran returns, with Shima, T-Hawk for Millennials, Jimmy Susumu for Jimmys, and Akira Tozawa for Monster Express, coming back to defend Hulk's kind of honor after the Mad Blanky Yamato team just completely ran through it. However, Hulk did get one quick pinfall in that Corkin main event. So it was Nombre contra Nombre, 5 versus 1 scramble elimination match. 28 seconds, first flash, Bonde Ryu, and then KZ immediately gets him with the Sky to Schoolboy right afterward.
Look, it was such an effective angle, and I say this with all the love in the world, that when Joe Lanza is doing his get off my lawn, cranky old man Dragon Gate takes, he references this BxB Hulk match as like, oh man, it used to be better. And I'm not saying it's better one way or another, but that angle has stuck in the forefront of his cluttered mind for a decade now because it came across so well. And also, and the larger point here was, again, we talk about, wrestling aping a lot of what Dragon Gate does in the ring now. I still don't think, and this is unfortunate, that a lot of wrestling has caught up with the logic behind some of what Dragon Gate does. And in 2014, you're still talking about American wrestling that is largely dominated by the dominance of John Cena. And the point that was always made coming out of that BxB Hulk handicap match was, if this was WWE, or if this was Impact, or God forbid you caught Ring of Honor on the worst night, the babyface is overcoming the odds and he's winning that handicap match, or he's going to the very end and then getting screwed right before he gets the win. And the way that they laid it out, just, sort of the shock and awe of the KZ win, but then the fact that they were still able to send the fans home happy with a 10-man tag match, it was a shock to the system in 2014. It really was so well done. And it's the kind of thing that, unfortunately, I think people copy a lot of what Dragon Gate does. I just don't think they're necessarily copying the right parts of what they do a lot of the time.
Yeah, and for like that, you had like the superpowers kind of combining to get behind Hulk, and then all of them basically afterwards going like, we don't want to team with you though. And those are the things that Dragon Gate, with like layers of nuance, and then Shima cutting promos on Kotoka and Chihiro Tominaga right afterwards with that. What was your next big takeaway since we got Mad Blanky off the board?
Well, I want to mention this about Mad Blanky. This is my second big takeaway. Is I'll make another long-winded point here. This is just a long-winded episode, but I was reading an old Observer yesterday, and I would recommend anybody like me that's in my position right now that is really into CMLL, go back to the Observer archives for the 75th anniversary show that CMLL did. Dave wrote this extensive piece on the history of the promotion. He literally goes back to the 1800s to explain how CMLL got to where they are. And he spends a lot of time talking about how in the 90s, when the peso was completely devalued, a lot of Mexican wrestlers at that point jumped ship to America. Does it sound familiar to the situation we're in Japan today? I would certainly hope it does, where, guys are frustrated with their pushes at home. They realize they can make more money elsewhere, so they go elsewhere. And Dave was talking about how, for CMLL to break out of their rut, it wasn't nostalgia. It wasn't UWA stars of the 80s. It was new stars of today, and it was specifically Mystico. And this is a very long way of saying, look, I think Dragon Gate is in a very healthy position. I believe in their young guys. I'm surprised at some of the pushback they get from other tastemakers in this bubble, because I think they have a loaded lineup of guys under 30 years old that are already good and are only going to get better.
Just look at the 30 for 30 list that's being published right now.
No kidding. And by the way, Mochizuki Jr. made it to the top 30. I'm so happy. That being said, I say all of this about, hey, it's a bright future. I love the talent, whatever. There has not been anyone over the last decade that has looked as cool as 2014 Yamato. And it just, it matters. It absolutely matters to the day-to-day of this promotion. I think Masquerade as a unit, I think the presentation of that unit got very close. There were a few different things, and we talked about them in real time. You, in particular, nailed it right on the head that this was not a unit when it was constructed. It's funny enough now looking at what Shun has become, but when that unit was constructed,
what dark Masquerade could be.
Yes, exactly. It was not a unit full of talkers, and you hit that immediately, that they were going to have a lower ceiling than they should because there are some inherent charisma issues in that unit. I think they from a presentation standpoint came very close to 2014 Mad Blanky, but Mike, I say it again, no one in the last decade has looked as cool as 2014 Yamato, and as this entire industry attempts to crawl back from COVID and the devaluation of the yen, I would be looking inwards. I would be looking at what you did 10 years ago, and I would be trying to find somebody that could even come close to matching the coolness factor of this era of Yamato.
You know who that would have been, I feel like, and it bums me out so much.
What's that?
I feel like Tien had the shot.
Okay, I had the same thought today as I was formulating that entire big diatribe there.
Right, because
it was an unknown. I mean, that guy was just so different than everybody.
Yeah, and you see a group led by Yamato and the compare and contrast of how even it worked out that this was at a time where there were up and down Millennials weekend. This was a very good weekend for the Millennials at a time like this, but it really is almost like on display, seeing like how much cooler like Yamato, and that was always a thing with like Shima in 99, 2000, 2001 always came off as a lot cooler than the baby faces, and maybe I think we see a little bit of it with Shun now. I it's difficult because he's masked, and it's difficult because he plays a psychopath, but people are going to love the Shun face turn, and I feel that there is a little bit of that with Yamato. Like there's a little thread there. It might be a little threadbare, but that is the closest thing I feel like we have.
Well, it's
or Mochizuki Jr. Mochizuki Jr.
Yes, okay. Junior's, I put an asterisk next to Junior's name. The thing that is going to be really hard in terms of pulling, let's say Dragon Gate specifically, out of the slump that everybody is facing is I've kind of come to the conclusion, and this is why Tien was so different and so intriguing, is that it has to be somebody new to start the charge. You know, you look at 2011 New Japan, and Tanahashi had gained momentum, and Kojima had done a great job in that era, and you had things starting to percolate, but Okada was new and exciting, and Okada is the name that people grabbed onto. And so it's not Shun's babyface turn that is going to completely change the complexity of this promotion. It's whoever is opposing Shun, whether it's him in his current state or it's him as a babyface. That is what I'm waiting on. That is the next domino to fall, is whether it's Junior or it's one of the four future guys, or, you know, God forbid it's somebody later than that has a special type of charisma. That is what you have to be looking at. It's not anybody that is on the active roster right now getting a push, because I think if that person existed on the active roster right now getting a push, we would see signs that it was working.
Yeah, and I know that a counter would be Jackie Kamei, but the argument is cool, not cute.
Yes, 100%. Kamei is a different ballgame. You know, Kamei is a guy who is only going to get hotter the hotter his home promotion is, but he's not the one making that promotion hot.
Right, yeah. I go back, like, Kamei's overall question is he going to be this lovable, scrappy guy to finally achieve the Dream Gate? That's his course. Mochizuki Jr., the thing I would want to see, and that's one of the things that really effing sucks about the YouTube, because I feel like you get to see this on the house shows, is we're still kind of seeing him discover himself as himself and not as Mochizuki's son. And I feel like as we get to see that part of the flower bloom, that is the potential for the cool factor. I feel like he has a little bit of it. The other person who I feel like could be cool, but it's going to be real tough, Yoshiki Kato.
Yeah. I mean, I thought Kato as a wrestler was really starting to make strides right before he got hurt.
I just feel like there's a bit of like the bad cop kind of works in a way.
Yeah,
I think there's a little bit of cooldom with that. But yeah, Yamato's the coolest guy on the planet in this time.
It really worked. What's next on your list? I got a few more.
Well, I told a little bit of a fib 10 minutes ago, Case. There was one other big storyline happening at this time.
Oh, are we going to do... Okay, let's do this now.
All right. So at that Korakuen, we had Shima bring up Chihiro Tominaga and Mr. High Tension Kotoka. And he basically called them to the line, chewed them out, and said, guess what, guys? Y'all suck. And we're going to do an Apuestas match because maybe you get an embarrassing haircut. It's going to make you like care or try, or the crowd like you more. So Mr. High Tension Kotoka, at a time that he already had a established relationship with Shima, it goes into this weekend trying to defend his hair from what would be a potential punch perm that later would be Punch Tominaga winning or losing the match, getting the punch perm, and immediately joining Mad Blanky right afterwards. But we're at the peak of Mr. High Tension. Kotoka, he is the third person in Dragon Gate called Mr. High Tension at this time.
So it was what? It was Tozawa first?
Tozawa, KZ had a brief portion as Mr. High Tension. He really took it over in 2016, and Mr. High Tension is kind of an English thing. It's like having good energy, basically, like bringing good energy. It's the same thing with like Genki, because Genki Horiguchi Genki is of course not his real name. Genki means energy and like good energy and bringing in like a joy of life kind of thing. And that's what Kotoka is trying to bring in. And first was Akira Tozawa's Mr. High Tension before he went on excursion. Then it became Kotoka before he went to Russia, I think. Because like he did like that weekend in Russia with Shima that led like directly into him joining Millenials.
Yes. Wow. Yeah, I forgot about that, but you're right.
But yeah, Mr. High Tension is just like this wild character that exists like just to be loud and annoying, get the crap beat out of them, basically.
Yeah, it was the story of Kotoka's entire career, whether he had the nickname or not.
Exactly. So having that on the show was one of those things that kind of took me back. And especially, I mean, you mentioned it, Kotoka had upwards of 27 minutes of ring time over this weekend.
It's interesting. I was looking at, the history of young boys in this promotion, the guys that had debuted since this show had happened. I'm not sure we've seen a weaker young boy or a weaker, low-level trainee than Kotoka. And then you still had by this point, Tominaga, was already labeled a disappointment. I mean, OG Shiba is, oddly enough, Kotoka's brother, and I guess you could throw him in the mix, but look at everybody that debuted after Kotoka, T-Hawk, and I mean, maybe Maria.
Yosuke Watanabe, yeah.
Yeah, but like, I don't know. I kind of like young Maria. Eita, Yuti, Shimizu, Lindemann, like all these guys, were great young wrestlers. Kotoka was not.
And I wonder how much of that with Kotoka was the fact that up until, I think, Millenials, he was not a full-time wrestler. He had a job. He was a morning reporter for TV Asahi, and I think he was based out of Osaka at that time. So he was not full-time, basically. In 2014, he was already a Dragon Gate wrestler for 5 to 6 years, and he would either through injury, talent, or by work, was just never had the time to see if he was going to develop that immediately. And I think that's part of the reason why the Kotoka Berserk push kind of came, and everyone was like, Kotoka's getting pushed, was just he was not consistently there. So there was really not that level of improvement in ring when you compare Kotoka to the fact that Kotoka was a member of World One.
I was just looking at our list here, and I mean, I guess I never really processed that he debuted before T-Hawk did.
Oh yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah, I mean, he debuted before Chihiro Tominaga did.
Yes, but so did everybody. I mean, Tominaga had been in the dojo for a lot longer than him, but
it was one of those things that because Kotoka, for various reasons, was just never past a certain phase, and you would get things like Mr. High Tension. You would get his Shiba character, where he was basically Shimashito for 6 months, and that was really it. And until a point where he joins Millennials and then Berserk, and you get basically that 3-year period was the only time he was essentially a full-time Dragon Gate wrestler.
Yeah, I mean, look, when he took the Brave Gate belt off of Akira Tozawa, I was pissed, but it worked out for him, and obviously he's done quite well for himself since leaving wrestling. Can I give you one of my big takeaways from 2014 Infinity?
Absolutely.
We might be underrating Monster Express. Which
sounds, oh my God.
Which sounds insane because they might be the most beloved unit in the history of English-speaking Dragon Gate fandom, but we might be underrating them.
And we got to see like full strength Monster Express in this weekend.
Just insane Shingo Tozawa Yoshino trios matches on both nights. No Sachihoko Boy, God love him, but no Uha Nation, no Anthony Nese. Just full strength, 3 of the 50 greatest wrestlers, maybe Akira Tozawa you put at 70, maybe 3 of the 70 greatest wrestlers of all time. Just, oh my God, I think we underrate Monster Express.
And this is like, at least for me, up until the Dia Hearts comes along and you have all the feuding that comes out of that with like the Fractured Babyface side, I still look at this era of Monster Express as the modern ideal for the Superface unit. You're able to start off the shows with them coming out, and you have 3 guys that are able to immediately connect to the crowd. I mean, one thing we didn't talk about before Dead or Alive was that there was this time period that you had the Big Six essentially split between Mad Blankey and Monster Express.
Mm-hmm.
And it just made such powerful units. And you had this overall storyline going on between Monster Express and Millennials that goes in and out of the shows around the fact that everyone over this weekend was trying to get through Naruki Doi at this point. But you had... I had both of these these Monster Express trios matches. Let me get back to my notebook here, because I had the first one at that point. I had the main event of night 1, which was Monster Express versus TNE and UT, and the Cat's Eye Award match. I was 4 stars on that, and then I was 3 3/4 for the match they had against Team Veterans Returns in the semi-main event of night 2, and it's just absolute fucking blasts of trios wrestling.
Look, we're gonna go match by match here in just a second. I got a few more big picture points I want to make, but let me tell you right now, I went 4.5 stars on both of the Monster Express trios matches.
Fair enough.
I went 4.5 stars.
I and 2 very different Monster Express style matches, I would say.
Oh man, do you have any more? I got 2 more on my list.
I mean, stuff that I want to talk about, like one of my bigger points when we get into the matches, I'm going to save that for then. What's one of your big takeaways there?
All right. One of them is, because this applies for both nights, is I think as a collective, because it wasn't like an obvious gruesome injury that took place in front of cameras, we might underestimate the damage that Eita has done to his body. Because if you look at 2014 Eita and you look at 2024 Eita, they are different human beings.
Right. It was really remarkable how Eita just throws his body around.
He's just so fast. Like, it's a different ball game. And and again, I think the guy has value now. I mean, I'm admittedly intrigued by what he's doing in Noah now that he's kind of with Kondo and he's wrestling with Oiwa some. Like, there's, I've got my eyes peeled on Noah to begin with, but especially Eita. But 2014 just a different animal. Thing I'll end with here, and then we'll talk about these shows piece by piece here. Just a general overview that I think has been lost due to history because of basically what has followed in every year since 2014, is that at this time period, and it was true 2005 to 2010, and then again 2014, mid 2014 to in 2014, BxB Hulk, effective, lovable babyface. And I don't know if historically his prime is remembered the way that it should be.
Yeah, it really on this weekend, you did have T-Hawk getting to main event his hometown. You did get to have KZ get a relative elevation starting at this point, I would say. But the story of the weekend, and really up until he just explodes at Final Gate, we are seeing peak BxB Hulk. And we are seeing peak BxB Hulk in his hometown in matches where he's having to overcome first KZ, who was able to get that pinfall 2 days before in Korakuen, and then a Lumberjack match with BxB Hulk. And by the end of it, the god of Sapporo is BxB Hulk. And when we get into the main event of night 2, we are on the road to Team We Love Pantaloons.
That's right. That's right. Oh, well, big picture wise, that's what I got. Do you want to go through these shows? These undercards we can blow through, but I want to talk about some of these matches specifically here.
Absolutely. So we opened the first Infinity with a backstage Hulk and KZ, of course. They're in Sapporo and their home prefecture getting ready, but we go straight to the ring. Millenials open up so we get to see the third hometown guy, NT Hawk. Brings out Monster Express. They will be fighting for the Cat's Eyes prize. And I take this from iHeartDG. I bring this from Jay. Tozawa called them a bunch of annoying kids. Monster Express would beat them both in Korakuen, and tonight there would be a 5-on-5 match happening in July for them. T-Hawk said that they would be up against the Triangle Gate champions tonight, and champions don't lose. Tozawa remind them that there were champions on their side too. He said although he was a Kobe native, his father lived in Sapporo for some time, so this meant that he was a Sapporo native, that he was also Hokkaido locale, and he hoped his fellow locals would support would-be local Tozawa in the match. And then from there, we went into the opener, Don Fuji teaming with Ryotsu Shimizu versus Masaki Mochizuki and Mr. High Tension Kotoka. Don Fuji wins with a Hime Boston Crab in 11 minutes and 54 seconds, where the big story of this match was Mochi and Fuji on the outs and them having a prolonged fight around the garage door.
Very fun. I was not expecting this. I did not remember this venue having a garage door. I don't know if this had ever been explored in previous outings here. If it was, I don't remember it. But a comedic opener, an enjoyable one, although, once again, a Kotoka match that was very long.
Right, and then we would get into a special singles match, Jimmy Kagetora versus Super Shisa. Jimmy Kagetora will be having a Brave Gate match against Flamita and the Champion Gate shows in Hakata Star Lanes the next week. So he goes over Super Shisa. It's just under 10 minutes with the Agura Makakare. I enjoyed the levels that we kind of got from here. Like, this was not full on like Euromaster Super Shisa here, but we got to see levels of grappling some Yaveo throughout it.
Yeah, this is what I was talking about with Zach and Hechicero at the start of this episode, is even just something like this on every show, or most shows, I think would be such a breath of fresh air. I'll table my Shisa thoughts here, because this was the second best Shisa match of the weekend.
Yep, no, easily so. One of the lowlights of the weekend, Shima and Dragon Kid, they would later be CK1. They're not CK1 at this time. Team up against Gamma and Yosuke Santa Maria. Gamma, after Dead or Alive, has been somewhat entranced by Yosuke Santa Maria. Gamma goes out, comes back in his bondage gear partway through. This goes 15 minutes. Shima almost goes full course on Yosuke Santa Maria, but finally just takes her out with the Meteora.
Yeah, it's a tough watch.
With what was not necessarily a tough watch, Doyama teaming up against Jimmy Susumu and Genki Horiguchi, H.A.G.M.E. Yamato goes over the King of Gate winner, Jimmy Susumu. This is a team of former King of Gate champions here, with the Frankensteiner of the Almighty in 1451 getting the edge going into their Dreamgate match. I was 4 flat on this. This was really some like prime Yamato just being an absolute dick. It ruled.
Well, I'm not exactly going to be doing any breaking news here, but you know what was good was 2014 Yamato versus 2014 Susumu. That was a winning combination if there ever was one.
Yeah, and it was just like a wild time. Like Doyama don't get the Dream Gate or don't get the Twin Gate until later that fall, and we're starting to see it at that point. And the heel heat that Naruki Doi got at this point.
Absurd. Again, I think we've been looking at Doi's career all wrong up until very recently.
Yeah, and also, I mean, he was the wild thing about the BxB Hulk Mad Blanky splintering was you had separate kind of storylines where even though BxB Hulk would later beat Yamato at Kobe Pro Wrestling Festival 2014, he continues around the orbit, and it becomes much more about Naruki Doi versus BxB Hulk than it does Yamato and BxB Hulk after basically Hulk gets the title off.
You know what I started thinking? I'm glad you said that, because I think historically, and I didn't do the math to see if this would have even lined up. Maybe there are logistical issues that have put Yamato in this position instead of Doi, but how often over the last few years have we seen a new Dreamgate champion where their first challenger is Yamato? And I started thinking, watching this match, oddly enough, man, I kind of wish Doi had built-in cachet as your V1 challenger instead of Yamato, where I think Doi, and this is a compliment, is so good at belittling people that if you had a champion you weren't entirely sure what they were going to do, if you had a champion that had won the belt but still needed to get over a hump or two, I think Doi brings that out of people better than Yamato does. And I started to think of yes, at Final Gate 2019, we have that amazing Doi-Ben match where Doi shocks everybody and wins the Dreamgate belt. Ben's reign started off against Yamato. And I just started to think, well, what if you flipped those? Would Ben K's reign have been better off sort of getting talked down to and beaten down by Doi, only to then come out of it a better champion? It was an interesting flashpoint for me.
Yeah, because then you would have either Benkei rising to the occasion because Doi, let's be frank, would be miles ahead of him on the microphone.
Yes.
So either you get through attrition, Benkei rises above, or you get him into the dirt a lot sooner, I feel like, if you do that.
And I also think, and this is jumping ahead to the Lumberjack match on the second night, but BxB Hulk at this point was without a unit, and instead of doing a lone wolf thing that just historically never really catches on in Dragon Gate, you had every babyface out there supporting him. The Millenials were on his side, Monster Express were on his side, Shima and Dragon Kid and Mochizuki were on his side. And it was like, wow, could you imagine if Ben K would have gotten that support in 2019 instead of doing this weird unofficial tag team with Shun Skywalker? Had they just been like, man, everybody likes this guy? Because that's basically the story with BxB Hulk is, other than Yamato and Doi and Cyber Kong and KZ, everybody likes this guy, and that is a much better story than I'm emotionally confused and I don't know who to team with.
And I think part of that was coming out of the cage and the way that you had all the baby faces in the cage, and how Hulk, in a lot of ways, everyone was like, all right, you did the right thing. And that meant that the baby face side, I mean, Tozawa and Hulk always are linked, but for T-Hawk, there's no reason that T-Hawk would have came out there and supported him. And I think you set him off on the right path by the way he turned face.
Yeah, I would say that's fair.
And then I need to pull back up I Heart DG. From there, after the Yamadoi versus Genki Horiguchi and Jimmy Susumu match, we had the battle of Sapporo, KZ versus BxB Hulk, it would be KZ getting the relatively big upset at the time after Mad Blanky gets all kinds of involved after KZ kicks out clean of the FTX, because there was a time period where we were trying to figure out what Hulk's primary finish was going to be, and the FTX was an opportunity at that time. There is a powder attack, there is a box attack, and then a heavily assisted Skydive Schoolboy gets KZ the win in his hometown in the semi-main event.
So basically, as I was watching this, I was thinking about how if by the end of this year, if Ishin could be in KZ's position in this match, I think that would be a massive win for everybody involved. I think that's kind of the direction that we need to be headed is, can Ishin essentially be this mid-card pest? And I think he's getting to that point, but I think if, your scenario now is Ishin's going to wrestle this match, but he's going to wrestle, pick a babyface, Strong Machine J. I don't think they feel comfortable giving Ishin that win at this point. I think by the end of the year, powder, box attack, roll up, now they're going to trust Ishin with that win. And I got to say, just for the match itself, it's really exciting going back and watching KZ kind of transform into a man in front of our eyes, because now we know what the next decade held for him. But in 2014, it was this weird novelty. It was like, oh, they're trying with KZ? Like, that's so weird. Look at that. And it obviously worked out, and this is one of the reasons. I thought this match was awesome.
Yeah, to kind of do a little bit of a 2024 analog, and this kind of works with what we did last week with our 30 for 30 ballots. It is hard to quantify how Dragon Gate is such a, I don't say it's like strict hierarchy, but the lost post rule becomes a position that becomes hard to get yourself out of. And it became a real thing of, for me, when you evaluate someone's career like Hyo, who is recently, I would say over the last 24 months, finally got himself out of the lost post role definitively, and now he's the most popular guy in the promotion. How do you quantify those sorts of things? Like, how do you quantify being the greatest ditch digger in the world at one point? And you kind of get to see, with the power of hindsight, KZ already put it together sooner than we thought. I always considered his Bravegate win and the injury and him then going over and turning face to be kind of when he starts putting it back together. But as we've seen through these last two Rewind and Rewatches, it was already happening in 2014.
It absolutely was. It's really an enjoyable time period, because you think about, he has the cage match where he loses his hair. He's got this match. He's got the Bravegate match in Korakuen with Flamita later on in the year. That was on that Summer Adventure Tag League show, and it kind of gets forgotten about because that was the T-Hawk and Eita versus Shima and Gamma match that everybody rightfully so lost their minds over. But there's a KZ Flamita match on that show, and that is when I remember the KZ narrative going from like, oh, that's weird, they're trying with him, to everybody kind of digging their heels in and going, yeah, I want more of this. I want to see what KZ can do. And then by 2015, it's a guy who was in the mix, and then you've got Dia Hearts, and then you've got Tri Vanguard, and then you got Vibes, and here we are today, and it's worked out quite well for him. It's really nice to see.
Yeah, and it's real. This is a real Dragon Gate roller coaster singles match, and at a time where Hulk feels not necessarily like a god, but he's setting up a path that we would see the company go back to time and time again, getting the focus all on the babyface that's going to get crowned at Kobe Pro Wrestling Festival. It results in a really fun watch, I feel like.
It does. I mean, as I think, when you can find these Diamond in the Rough KZ matches, which I would say are, this match, the Flamita match, and then World 2007 when he wrestles Genki for the Bravegate belt. That's MCKZ. That's MCKZ. It's one of my favorite heel Genki performances, because I don't really like heel Genki. It's the best MCKZ match. And then you've got about a 6-year gap to this. And then that's where the story of KZ can really be told.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And then we had the main event for June 7th, 2014, Dragon Gate Infinity 340. This is the Cat's Eye Prize Trios match representing Monster Express. It is the top team, Masato Yoshino, Akira Tozawa, and Shingo Takagi versus the founders of Millennials, T-Hawk, Eita, and UT. It is Tozawa getting the win for Monster Express with a packaged German that UT keeps on trying to fight his way out of to win the Cat's Eye Prize. What is the Cat's Eye Prize, you may ask? Well, it is a karaoke club at that time in Sapporo that opened up at Dragon Gate.
Fun. I did not know that.
Yeah, so they got like a party night. I guess they got like a voucher for it. That was the sponsorship for that weekend.
Interesting. There's a few different ways you can break down this match. I mean, one, it was awesome. There's a reason I said we might underrate Monster Express because they just jump out of the screen. Where again, you're talking about 3 of the 100 greatest wrestlers ever, and with Shingo and Yoshino, you're talking about guys who are in the very comfortably in my top 50. You've got what I feel is peak T-Hawk. Because, as we've discussed a number of times, He's
got the hoodie.
Yeah, he's got the hoodie. He's got the blonde hair. He did a leapfrog in this match over Shingo. And
oh my God. Yeah.
It's like, look, his career did not work out the way that I'm sure anybody wanted it to. But there are still times with T-Hawk where I'm like, yeah, I would have done the exact same thing. I would have tried just as hard as they would have. Like, he is sort of a freaky athletic guy who we don't really consider to be a freaky athletic guy, but like this man got up off the ground in this match.
Right. And I think that when you have a 6-man tag where very clearly Yoshino and Tozawa, they're going to be the ones on their side doing the flying, especially when you have Shingo around. And then you have Eita and UT, especially Eita at this time. This was not the Tope Con Hello where I went, no wonder you took this out of your game, bud. But you had him flying around at this time, and T-Hawk really showed that he was able to do that as well. I really enjoyed Tozawa and T-Hawk in this one. You don't always get a whole bunch of them in these pairings. It always ends up being Shingo and T, and then or in Tozawa and Eita, but I like seeing Tozawa and T-Hawk here. Nice chemistry from those two.
I think Tozawa's historically T-Hawk's best opponent. I mean, I've told the story. I said it on the Dead or Alive podcast we did last month, but like the May 2014 Corkin show was headlined by T-Hawk versus Tozawa, and that is the match that took me from like, hey, this Dragon Gate thing is pretty cool to like, okay, I'm going to watch every Dragon Gate show and every Dragon Gate match. I mean, these guys killed it with each other constantly. It's T-Hawk's best opponent. The thing in terms of chemistry that was jarring to me here was it's crazy. At this point in time, we were a month removed from Flamita versus Susumu, and as the summer goes along, you get more and more and more Flamita, and rightfully so. UT already feels out of place, which is crazy because he's actually really good in this match, in particular against Shingo. But when you think about UT's career, it's the opposite of KZ, where it's like, wow, this is really when it started. With UT, it's like this match, and then you have to wait 4 years for him to do anything else that was relevant.
Well, you had Katoka try to shave his head.
That's right. We did have that.
Yeah, that kind of was that for him. But my last note for this, going back to our big takeaways, God, this MX pairing.
Oh my God. I mean, again, I went 4.5 stars on this match. It's why, like, I'm not only so glad that we found this footage, but I felt like there were, the Shisa match. We got a singles match with Shisa in it. That's a massive win. We got the Doyama tag match, which was a borderline notebook match. That was awesome. KZ versus Hulk was awesome. And then this main event was something that would hold up with the best wrestling in 2024.
Yeah, it was absolutely just a great blast. And that finished the first night in Hokkaido. The next night they opened up building the it started with building up the Lumberjack match, and then for the opener it's the original Jimmy's pairing of Jimmy Susumu and Jimmy Kagetora, Yokosuka Chome versus the mentor team of Shima and Mr. High Tension Katoka. It is the Mugen on Katoka getting the win for Susumu, keeping up the Big Mo going into Hakata, but 15 minutes and 23 seconds.
Yeah, I do not have a ton to say on the first 3 matches on this
Nope.
show, other than I was just shocked at how much Kotoko was given in this match.
Yep. From there, we got Genki Horiguchi versus Don Fuji. This was a blast.
Imagine Horiguchi versus Fuji, and there you go.
Yeah, and involve a lot of count out teases because of the garage door. Don Fuji, there is a greater discussion to be had. This is not the show. I think each time I see his comedy matches, it might just be because the style of comedy is the style of comedy I like in wrestling. He might, it's him or Stalker for like my favorite comedy wrestler of all time. And
Stalker still hits higher for me. I mean, peak Stalker is just on another level. It's like peak Kobashi, but in a completely different way.
Yeah. Sometime I'm going to there'll be a year. I'm not going to do it this year, but there will be a year in the Voices of Wrestling Secret Santa will I'll give someone Don Fuji versus Konamawa Ichikawa from the last Dragon Gate show at Hakata Starlands.
Yeah, that'd be a good one.
Because that is a 4-star comedy match. and I'd much rather talk about that than UT and Maria versus Gamma and Ryotsu Shimizu. Neraluchi winning the match for Maria. Did not remember this being her finish so early.
No, nor did I. It's a bummer that Shimizu was stuck doing this. I would really like to talk about Ryotsu Shimizu, but not in the context of this match.
Yeah, he will by the end of the summer be Big R Shimizu.
That's right, and we were all better off for it.
Yep. T&E versus Yamato and KZ, your pre-intermission main event. It is T&E, T-Hawk, and Eita. T-Hawk getting the win over KZ with the Night Ride. Great weekend for KZ.
Great weekend for KZ. Great weekend for Yamato. Great weekend for TNE. I mean, I hesitate to call this a TV style match because it did go 18 minutes, but this was like a main event of a TV taping that you would see in American wrestling. I mean, you would hope for a match this good because I thought everybody was on it here, and for as good as KZ and Eita and T-Hawk were, my eyes gravitated towards Yamato, and I don't think he's lost, a big step in the last 10 years, but he cared more. I mean, we're literally going through this story right now where Yamato's been bored in Dragon Gate, and I think that's bled through into his actual work, whether it's a story or not. And you just see here, on this smaller show, I mean, he was a killer in this match. He was absolutely phenomenal.
I mean, he almost didn't catch Eita on the tope.
He did not. And then I forget if it was Eita. Oh no, he took a BT bomb in this match that was just disgusting.
Oh God.
T-Hawk, you see why they wanted to try it.
T-Hawk got some force behind his BT bombs back then.
Yes, he did. Like
some bounce with it. They're just like, oh Christ, that's that one's gonna stink. We Are Team Veteran returns. Are your semi-main event pairing going up against the Monster Express top team, Masaki Mochizuki, Dragon Kid, Super Shisa. Super Shisa was able to kick out of the Made in Japan, but Shingo Takagi just popped right back up and just floored him with a pumping bomber. Just a phenomenal semi-main.
I say this so legitimately from the bottom of my heart. Thank you so much, my friend, for finding this footage, because it has gifted us a legitimately great Super Shisa match that we previously did not have, and that is the greatest gift that anybody can give me. If you've ever listened and been confused as to why we specifically hold Shisa in the regard that we do, I think this match is the perfect showcase match because he's in there with 3 top guys. He kicks out of the Made in Japan, like you said. They respect him a ton. And to me, in a match with, we're talking 5 of the 100 greatest wrestlers ever with Tozawa, Yoshino, Shingo, Dragon Kid, and Mochizuki, this is the Shisa match. I mean, I was in awe of everything he did. I thought he was the driving factor in this. Not that Mochi wasn't great, not that Dragon Kid didn't have his moments. We've talked about Monster Express, but you have to watch this match, and I don't know how anybody could do it and not just be glued to everything that Shisa did. There's no one in wrestling like him right now, and I understand why, because to be able to do what he did, you have to have such a specific background in such specific creativity. But man, I wish somebody would just try to do even a lesser version of what Shisa does in this match.
Yeah, and it is at like a level with him where you're able to see him just the ways that he would go for a Yoshi Tanik is special here because he constantly is going for it. He's trying to get up in scenarios where with like Tozawa and Yoshino trying to get around with them. Then you have like Tozawa and Shingo being able to fight out of it. And it becomes such a remarkable thing for him to see.
It was awesome. I mean, he does a double abdominal stretch on Yoshino and Tozawa at one point. I've never seen that before.
No, you are absolutely right about it. This is worth going absolutely out of your way for. And then we get the main event, the Lumberjack match. BxB Hulk gets his hands on Naruki Doi, and you get to see Dragon Gate. I feel like it's always interesting to see them do a Lumberjack match. They do them occasionally. It's not a super... It's not a stipulation that I feel like has a lot of purchase within the company. They come back, they'll do it, and then they won't do one for a couple of years. But
I feel like they should do it more.
Yeah, because you get ones like this one where you have basically 5 units out there that their one MO is fuck Naruki Doi, and you get Mad Blankly trying to fight them all off and trying to support their guy that they've throughout the summer and continually will go and try to do whatever they can to promote Naruki Doi. Like, that's the wild thing about Mad Blanky at this time. Yamato is the Dreamgate champion, but Naruki Doi is the most protected guy in the unit.
Yeah, and I thought it was a great dynamic. I think that's one of the things that ages best about Mad Blanky is just the dominance of your top guy, whether it was Tozawa at certain points or Hulk or Yamato or Doi, and then undercard guys, whether it be Cyber Kong or KZ or, later Punch, that all just, I think, played their role to a T. The balance of that unit made a lot of sense. And you see it here. And, I say this as somebody, I waited 10 years to watch this match, and it lived up to the hype. I mean, I was enthralled by the end of this, again, for the reasons I said earlier, where you have Mad Blanky with the obvious advantage because they have the a unit and Hulk does not. But to see the entire Dragon Gate roster basically come out to save BxB Hulk is something that had me standing and pacing. I mean, I was fully on board with it, super into it. There was great near falls down the stretch, and this era of BxB Hulk, man, it has aged incredibly well. I think he's super underrated, and to see him, drill Naruki Doi with the first flash as Doi is covered in powder, I just thought it was an excellent end to an excellent match. I would go 4 1/4 on this. I think it's really, really worth your time.
And it really feels like at this point, this is one of the fun things about doing this project is I was hungering for the D Hearts formation angle to happen right afterwards, because you had all of the interference and it ended with the Sankaku Gary from Mochizuki and then the DK Ultra Rod. And I'm like, oh God, now we're getting some pantaloons going on here. But no, instead, everyone supports BxB Hulk in his pursuit against Mad Blanky, and it will continue onwards for them going into the double shot champion gate in Hakata Star Lanes. Something that I thought was the case, and while you were talking, I was looking this up. Someone else from Hokkaido, Super Shisa.
Oh, really?
He always portrays the Shisa being from Okinawa, the Ryukyu dragon thing.
Yeah.
But he's actually from Hokkaido.
Interesting. Well, I mean, look, that makes sense because I'm trying to think. I think it was 2016. Yeah, it was the triple shot they ran in 2016. He's all over those shows. That's the triple shot that has the Shisa versus Shingo singles match that was filmed but didn't air because they had to put that triple shot into one TV taping, which is such a bummer. That is a holy grail match if there ever was one. But that makes sense. They always treated him well in Hokkaido.
Right. Yeah. So that made a lot of sense for him being there. But yeah, no, this is exceptional Lumberjack match. Something that I meant to bring up earlier that these shows really kind of do. So looking at the time frame, we do get Mr. Nakagawa is already a referee at this time, but you know who we don't really give enough credit for his role exceptional.
Who's that?
Takayuki Yagi.
Oh, yeah.
He's phenomenal here. And there's like this one moment so this is a time where Dragon Gate's still using, they're still throwing streamers. And at a certain point, BxB Hulk gets thrown onto the outside and he brings back in a streamer that's stuck to his shoe. And he does like this full sequence and you could see Yagi look at it. And then right as the camera cuts away during a 3 count, it completely is away from the ring and Yagi's putting his hand back in his pocket.
There you go. That's a great anecdote there. I did not notice that, but I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, it's just one of those like little things that you get to see from a referee that is really kind of fun to see there. But what a blast of shows that they had for these Infinities, and a real interesting time in Dragon Gate.
Dude, I love it. I mean, again, this is the period I'll always be nostalgic for. Nostalgia is a dangerous thing, but I love 2014 Dragon Gate. It's just it's a promotion and an era that makes me feel very warm inside, and I can't express how happy and excited I was to watch these shows finally, and then for the shows to be good. Like, this could have been a dud of a weekend, like Kobe Sambo Hall 2017 energy, where everybody was just walking through it. But to get the Shisa matches and to get the Monster Express matches and to have Yamato and Doi all over these shows, I mean, this was so much fun. I know this is not historically the most important show we'll ever talk about, but I had a blast doing it.
Absolutely. And I really like this time. And getting to rediscover these shows have been a lot of fun. And I think it's a kind of good thing to revisit, as like this was Dragon Gate's 15th anniversary year happening, and this being the 25th anniversary, and we can kind of see some traits there, I feel like. And then also, I don't know if I enjoy this champion run to Kobe World as much as Yamato's in 2016, but I do feel like, I know I mentioned this earlier, that this is a high water mark in making someone feel like the guy. Like, coming out of this weekend, BxB Hulk versus Yamato, like those are like the two big names on like the edge of your lips, and that's not even to consider the fact that Yamato has a hidden Dream Gate match that he will have against Jimmy Susumu that never made tape.
Yeah, very much so.
So anything else you want to touch on, Case, before we get out of here this week?
I don't. I feel very satisfied.
Absolutely. Well, we will be back next week talking. They have Prime Zone, and we're looking into Kobe World Month. I mean, we're getting right back into it. Even though June was a little bit of a sleepy month, July will not be that. You could follow us on Twitter at Open Voice Gate. Case is at _ in your case. I'm at Fujiheya. Thanks for listening to Open Voice Gate. We'll be back with you next week. Take care.
Hello, everyone. My name is Taylor.
And I'm Kelly.
And we are the co-hosts of Jumping Bomb Audio, the #1 show all about the world of Joshi Pro Wrestling. Episodes drop every other Monday, where we discuss the biggest Joshi news, review shows, and preview the hottest upcoming Joshi action.
So whether you're a new fan or an old fan, we've got something here for you at Jumping Bomb Audio.
Check us out on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network.